Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Karen Neighbor Steals My Water and Electricity, Claims She Has Permission. I ruined her. There has been a total douche living next to my elderly mother for way too long. She used to have really nice neighbors who moved away, and a couple of years back this guy bought the house and has been showing off just how horrible of a person he is. While I don't like with my mom, I visit her often because she isn't in the best health but still wants to live in her own home. She has healthcare workers that help take care of her and she can do the basics by herself. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that she is vulnerable though, and trust me, neighbor is far from a genius. On the few occasions that I have met him while visiting my mother, I would get a horrible taste in my mouth from the things he would say. He talked about if I was going to sell the property after she died because he would be interested. What kind of way is that to introduce yourself to somebody you literally just met? The topic that he loved droning on about the most was his business. From the things he said, it wasn't exactly clear what he did for work, just that he owned a business. He also loved to talk about how the government was horrible and so stupid because he could get away not paying anything for his business and make extra money. This guy is clearly annoying, but I'm sure you want to know what he did that made me start writing this story. His want to save money must have gone so far that he decided he could take advantage of my sick mother by running lines to steal her water and electric. He hid the cords in bushes too, and the only reason I found them is because I handle her bills and saw water and electric were skyrocketing for no reason. When I went to check the meters, I could see the wires with a bad attempt at being buried underground, and my anger started to boil. I took a hedge cutter to the wires, but that didn't seem like enough revenge for me. You might be saying right about now that I should have gone to the town or even tried to sue him for the money. Well, I did try that at first and then found out that it was hard to prove that he was stealing it because he could claim my mother gave him permission. She has some slight memory issues, but I know she didn't okay something like this. When I confronted him about the whole thing, he basically laughed and told me that I was jealous that he just knew how to work the system and I didn't. He went on about how if my mother isn't able to keep tabs on her own house and what is going on around it, then she shouldn't be living there. Taking advantage and insulting my mother is a surefire recipe for making me want to get some serious revenge on this guy. I was going to start with the latest thing he had been bragging about, his new garage. When he wasn't insulting the government, he was bragging about how he was building a fancy garage with all the money he had made. I don't care what people do for the most part on their own property on a normal day. For this, I just felt like it was my duty to alert the town that he was building without a permit or any kind of permission. He was pissed when he had people come over and put yellow tape all around the half-built garage, stopping his project. It had to sit half-built for months before the order came in that he had to tear it down. The best part with that was by the time he was forced to tear it down, a bunch of raccoons had made their home in there, and it was just that much harder, and then he got fined for housing raccoons and causing messes for the surrounding neighbors. They live in a pretty strict HOA. I guess all of that money he spent not paying taxes was down the drain with the garage and the giant fines. Now you might call me petty for this, but I didn't think that was enough revenge for him messing with my mother. It certainly didn't teach him any manners, as he still was insulting about her and kept talking about taking her land when she passed away. He wanted to go after the one thing that mattered the most to me. I could do the same to him. I know I mentioned before that I didn't know exactly what he did with his business. I had his name and that was enough to work off of. I found the name of the business online and decided that it was important to report to the IRS that they weren't paying any taxes and had some shady business practices going on. I'll explain it the best I can, but I might be a little off on some parts since I'm not too knowledgeable about the whole thing. He was paying his workers cash under the table so that he didn't need to declare having them as employees and they didn't need to declare making the money from the job. He had one set of records that he kept for himself with all the employees and what they made. He had a different set of records saying he had much less employees that weren't working many hours. I assume this somehow related to how he got out of paying all of his taxes when it came to his business. The IRS eats up things like this though and did a full audit on him to see exactly what was going on with his money. The fact that he had cash withdrawals that were matching cash deposits made by confirmed employees. I don't know how they actually proved that he was paying people under the table for cheap work and not declaring it, but he got caught. His business was forced to close down, and he was having an in-depth audit from the IRS who were going to go through every small detail of his taxes and finances. He was going to end up owning them a lot of money. He didn't end up moving away, but it was clear that some major changes happened with this guy. He traded in his expensive car for something cheaper as well as his clothing. He stopped bragging so much because now he had nothing to really brag about. I think he got a job where he would actually have to work hard, so he seemed too tired to fight with me and start up with my mother. Most importantly, he never tried to steal water or electric from her again. He learned messing with an angry daughter means that your life could end up destroyed. The next story is titled, You Know Your Rights? Okay, go for it. Background. My ex and I were 3 months into separation, as I kept suggesting divorce agreements, trying to find what she would accept other than take her back and return to bring a doormat for her. I have a good head for legal documents and understood very early that as much as I would prefer to just burn everything down and disappear, legally it was very likely I was going to be paying alimony, and she was entitled to a fair share of everything. But in a no-fault state with no gender preferences, it did mean a fair share. It was clear that legally I would not get an approval for an agreement heavily biased in her favor. So, I kept reworking and sending possible divisions. Every few days for months. She would object to anything that put any responsibility on her, anything that left something of value out of her hands. Anytime I asked her what terms she would be okay with, she would just derail the conversation to something else. Not long into this I realized that I would need a paper trail, so everything went to email only. Through all of this, I had recognized too that a court would order spousal support, so there wasn't any point in just cutting her off financially. Not a total doormat at this point though. I had moved my direct deposit to a solo account and kept up her weekly cash flow and kept paying the bills. But my final offer in this period was the heavily unbalanced offer of splitting the cars 1/2 each. Me taking all the debt including her student loans, paying her $3 to $4K a month for a year so she could get her feet under her, and she gets all the stuff. I walk away with my car, my dogs, some tools, and some clothes. No go. Not good enough for her. And so, we get to the meat of the story for the malicious compliance. 3 months in, I finally get her to agree to a mediator, since I'm getting nowhere. She shows up to the initial meeting, the first time we have seen each other in a while, the second time since splitting. She was staying with her sister. The mediator starts out with the rules of mediation, and the agreements to sign. I sign easily, she balks, but signs it finally. One of the relevant terms is that we agree to not file any other legal paperwork. We would come to an agreement and the mediator would file the final court papers on both of our behalf to get the divorce ordered. The mediator starts asking basic questions. And every question, to either of us, results in my ex launching into an irrelevant topic attempting emotional manipulation of me or him. I quickly resolved to gray rock her directly, and only direct my interactions to the mediator. I do my best to ignore her off-topic ramblings and reply to the mediator when she briefly crossed relevancy like someone falling from a tree and briefly being stopped by various branches on the way down. The peak was when she literally crawled on top of the big table to stick her face in mine to force me to see her and engage in her ranting. The mediator called it quits at that point. He reminded her of the rules she agreed to, gave us homework to fill out, and had us schedule the next meeting with his clerk, 2 weeks out. 3 days later I get served with a summons to court for a hearing over spousal support. The summons shows the claim my ex made that all I had received from her in 3 months was $130. Oh boy. Not true at all. Not to mention in violation of the mediator terms. I end up on a conference call with the ex and the mediator as he tells her that she needs to withdraw the complaint or mediation can't continue. She adamantly insists that she knows her rights. So, the mediator ends his involvement, cuts us refund checks minus time worked so far, and exits stage left. I prepare for the hearing. I print out 3 months of bank statements and highlight every transfer to her. Every bill paid on her behalf. Every ATM withdraw by her card. Over 100 toll bills I received from her just driving through express lane tolls, so I got the elevated license plate fee mailed to me. $13,000 and change. You missed a couple zeros in your complaint, I thought. My final stack of paper was rather thick. So, I made and printed an Excel spreadsheet summary for the cover sheet. I also looked up the spousal support rules again. It is 40% of the difference between the income goes from the higher paid to the lower paid. Some little wiggle room, but that's it. Simple. She was currently getting up to 72% of my pay once you factored her bills in. This court hearing was a good thing. Not as good as a mediator and fast resolution, but I wasn't likely to end up screwed more here. Not to mention I had some daydreams of her finding out what lying on court documents might do. Court date rolls around. I show up to court, waiting in the hall outside the family law section. She shows up and plops herself next to me to start going off on me again. I try to ignore her. Then to keep from engaging, I start a written transcript of her ranting using the back cover of my paperwork folder. Finally, she realized what I'm doing and ends the ranting with, "Oh, I guess you are writing what I'm saying so you can make your friends hate me." They needed no encouragement. She huffs a few seats away and is quiet the rest of the time we waited. The court officer, not a judge, just someone authorized to handle it since it is a simple and clear legal process, finally comes to get us, and we head in. The officer starts the legal speeches, yada yada, then asks my ex if she has anything to add to the complaint. She launches into a roller coaster speech proclaiming all my bad faults, some of which were real. How mean I was to try to divorce her, and how I obviously didn't need any of the money I made, because he is just going to live somewhere simple and cheap anyway. Yeah, her words. The court officer returns to the present like someone climbing down from the kitchen table after seeing a rat run by. And she asks me if I have anything I'd like to say. She can see the stack of paper and eyeballs it as she is talking. I hand over the stack, tell the officer that the summary sheet on top should help clear up the financial points in question, and just verbally start going through the items. At each one, my ex interrupts to give a reason why that item shouldn't count. Every single one. The officer keeps asking her to stop interrupting, but to no avail. We finally finish the list. The officer is shaking her head slightly and says, "Mr. Yen, this court process is to ensure that both parties are doing the right thing. So, all of the and gestures to encompass the stack of paper needs to stop right now. We will garnish your paychecks for the amount specified by law and send that to her instead." I know it's a win. I knew it was going to be. She didn't. She sat there all smug as we get into the calculations. I asked for a couple of adjustments, to keep the amount of her car payment since I co-signed, and I wanted to be sure the bill was paid. I expected that she would refuse or overspend on other stuff and be unable to pay it. I didn't want to give her the power to trash my credit. The officer agreed. I then asked to keep the insurance payment amount too, for much the same reason. Also agreed by the officer. My ex continued to be smug. I know she was thrilled at the idea of getting a court check directly. It sure would show me. Everything wrapped up, we got the totals, signed papers, I handed over a check for the first payment, and the officer got up to make copies of everything. I asked the officer if I could wait in another room while she did, and got an agreement with a bit of side-eye at my ex. I got my paperwork first, with the officer saying, "It might take a few minutes for her to get her paperwork, but you are free to go." I got the hint and left immediately. I had parked a few streets away anyway, another barrier if she couldn't park near me. I got in my car and immediately called my cell carrier and cancelled her phone. Does she want to set up her own plan? I can't answer that. I am obeying a court order to remove her from my accounts. Okay, and worked down the remaining subscriptions I was paying for that she used. I even had the bills in front of me from court with account numbers and customer service numbers right there. I was done and driving home when she started blowing up my phone with incoming emails demanding to know what I was doing. Then texts from her sister's phone. Then calls. I just grinned and didn't answer any of them. She stopped after an hour or so and gave me a few hours of silence. Then an all-caps email with a screenshot of the Netflix inactive account message. OMG. Even Netflix. I admit I giggled. The fallout wasn't over though. A month later, after she realized how much less she has from me after winning her case, she files an appeal. It is denied due to lack of reason. A month later, she files a complaint that I wasn't paying her car payment. Just an excuse to get into court. I had been paying it, and I was also pretty confident that even if I hadn't, she didn't know how to get into that loan's account. She legally could, just never had cared to learn how. I had a lawyer at this point, and we both go to court. She is going to join by phone. The officer paused before calling and tells my lawyer, "This lady is a piece of work." The validation of that statement will always remain with me. The call goes predictably. My ex makes irrelevant rants. The officer keeps shutting her down. Finally asks my ex for proof that I wasn't paying the car payment, as she is holding statements and check images proving I had. My ex nearly screams, "I just know he isn't so he can hurt me." The officer replies, "I am holding proof that he has paid it and is satisfying his legal obligation. The complaint is dismissed. Thank you," and hangs up on my ex. Divorce took another 10 months. Lots more crazy. Teaches her newbie lawyer a hard lesson, and I walked away with even less alimony than the spousal support, and only about 60% of the debt. I lost my dogs to her though, my only regret in the outcome. One is certainly past old age limits now, the other is in that range. I still miss them. The last story is titled, "I took a coworker's parking spot after they complained I was arriving late." My commute to work got progressively longer and unpredictable over the past year due to 4 bridge closures occurring within months or weeks of each other. No date has been given for their reopening, so for the time being, short of heading off for work an hour or two ahead of time, you risk arriving a minute to 5 minutes late once or twice a week. Everyone has been impacted by the traffic in one way or another, which I mentioned because there was no way someone could feign ignorance. One coworker, though, didn't care about legitimate reasons for my being slightly late for work every now and then, and complained so adamantly behind my back about it that my immediate supervisor reluctantly wrote me up. I knew it had to be that one coworker because they would get noticeably irritated whenever traffic conditions were brought up. They would leave the room, loudly interrupt with unimportant questions or comments, or roll their eyes. They're also known for complaining about every little thing, at one point having played a big role in not having a seasonal employee rehired the following year. Despite that coworker, I love my job. So, I started leaving for work an hour and a half earlier than before. My arrival time is now anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes before my shift starts. And that's when I noticed the annoying coworker always arrives about 10 minutes early and always has a very convenient street parking space available. I used to park on a different side of our building before traffic got bad and had never noticed that they'd unofficially claimed that public parking spot as theirs. Most of the time, I'm at work early enough to get my pick of any spot in our always crowded employee parking lot, but no parking spot other than theirs makes up for my having to wake up at 5:30 in the morning. That coworker can't complain about my being late now. They know better than anyone that I'm at work way before I have to. I've mentioned my arrival time to other coworkers with them in earshot, so they know I'm parking there out of spite. I've also gone as far as parking right in the middle of a space large enough to accommodate their car and mine. I have no idea if they've complained to our supervisor about it or not, but I really want them to have been stupid enough to complain about my taking their public parking spot away. Thank you for listening.